Giyu Tomioka, one of the first important characters we see in Demon Slayer, and much more of an interesting character than people make him out to be. And in this video, I'm going to go over the life story of Giyu Tomioka. We learn of his tragic backstory through a flashback. As a child, he had an older sister named Tsutako Tomioka. She sacrificed herself in order to protect her young Giyu from a demon, despite having a wedding the next day. The death of his sister was an extremely important event that began the development of his inferiority complex. He was sent to live with a relative but ran away during the journey, wherein which he was saved by Urokodaki. Giyu becomes his apprentice and becomes acquainted with Sabito within this time frame, and due to their similar age, they quickly became friends with each other. They both entered the final selection, but Giyu is injured by the first demon that attacks and saved by Sabito. A week passes, and despite killing every demon on the mountain, Sabito succumbs to his injuries and dies. While on the other hand, Giyu is able to survive the final selection without killing a single demon. At this point, Giyu believes that the blood of his best friend and older sister are on his hands, and that he has to live with this truth for the rest of his life. And it seems like he's accepted this to the point where he bears it on his Haori. One half is Tsukato's and the other half is Sabito's, which I think is a nice touch. We first see Giyu in episode 1, where Tanjiru is fighting off a recently turned Nezuko. Based on his appearance and even without him speaking, he seems like an emotionless and stoic demon slayer. And on a superficial level, when he does begin to speak, his use of language and seeming lack of empathy towards Tanjiro while he's begging further reinforces this idea. However, later on we see Giyu's internal dialogue, and in this we see a much more considerate, empathetic side of him, even going as far to say that he knows his pain and how he must want to cry out. It seems like Giyu is internally rooting for Tanjiro, wanting him to fill his heart with anger to become strong and protect his sister. Upon seeing a wounded Nezuko protect her brother, which Giyu implies is extremely rare, he spares them and refers them to his old master, Urokodaki. This goes against the code and logic of a demon slayer, and this to me shows that he's willing to sacrifice anything in order to follow what he truly believes is right. The next arc that we see Giyu play a role in is during the Mount Natagumo arc. He is easily able to kill Father, who is causing Inosuke and the other slayers immense trouble, displaying Giyu's strength and making the gap between the Hashira and the other slayers clear. And to add on to this further, he one-shots Ruri and Upper Moon, which is a further testament to his strength. After the fight is concluded, we get to see an interesting interaction between Giyu and Tanjiro. Giyu steps on Ruri's kimono, a clear act of disrespect, while telling Tanjiro to not waste pity on the demon that ate dozens of people. Tanjiro retorts saying that demons were once human and deserve some respect after death, while telling him to move his foot. Before their conversation could go any further, Shinobi pops up attacking Nezuko, but Giyu blocks her strike. She then goes on to state that Giyu is hated by the other Hashira, likely due to the nature of their conflicting ideals. At this point in the story, we don't know much about them, but we can assume that they're extremely duty bound. Shinobu not hesitating to kill a Nezuko being protected by another slayer, or asking Giyu about the situation being an example of this. Giyu and Shinobu continue fighting until a crow orders them to capture Tanjiro and Nezuko and take both of them back to headquarters. At the Hashira meeting, it's clear what Shinobu meant by him being hated. He's seen standing alone with no emotion on his face, while in parallel most of the other Hashira are close together and conversing, making light of a seemingly tragic situation. In the same scene, we find out that the only reason that Nezuko isn't being executed is due to Giyu stating that he'd off himself if Nezuko ate a human. We saw in episode 1 that he's willing to do what he believes is right, but there's a lot of significance in the fact that he was willing to put his life on the line for two people he barely knows, even more so when you think of his position as a Hashira. In the Hashira training arc, we get to see a much more exposed, raw side to Giyu, which gives us more insight into his character. At the second Hashira meeting, the Demon Slayer mark is being discussed, something that only the most talented Demon Slayers have, which grants the user superhuman strength, speed, and new breathing techniques. Giyu ends up leaving midway through the discussion, saying he's different from the others. Sanemi interprets this as him thinking he's better than the others, but in reality it's the complete opposite. This is because of his inferiority complex, making him believe he isn't a good enough slayer for the mark to manifest, and the idea that he's undeserving of the title of Hashira. Later on, Tanjiro is given the task of talking to Giyu, and eventually Giyu gives in and shows a vulnerable side to Tanjiro. Because of him surviving the final selection without killing a single demon, he states that he's not worthy of becoming the water Hashira and doesn't deserve a place in the Demon Slayer Corps due to his own perceived weakness. He goes on to say that he won't manifest the mark, though Sabito might have, showing that he thinks he's the one that should have died in place of him. Something I want to touch on quickly is the meaning of the word Hashira. Its direct translation is pillar, something that's seen as the void of weakness and formidable, and a man that's been mentally crumbling fighting from the very beginning has to bear the weight of protecting humans and upholding the values of a demon slayer. Tanjiro understands where Giyu's coming from, as he experienced the exact same thing with Rengoku. He then says something that visibly shakes Giyu, forcing him to remember Sabito's words, which brings him back to his senses. I just wanted to say that I am going to be talking about the final arc from this point onwards, so this is your warning if you aren't caught up. The arc begins with Kaguya's mansion blowing up, and all the slayers rush to the scene, Giyu and Tanjiru being together. They encounter Akaza, and within the fight, Giyu manages to manifest his Demon Slayer mark, a sign to me that he was able to surpass himself both physically and mentally. The fight goes on, and despite Giyu's training, he still gets folded by Akaza and is saved by Tanjiro at the last moment. As the fight goes on, Giyu's resolve and willingness to put his life on the line for Tanjiro becomes increasingly apparent. Akaza is finally defeated, and both slayers are unconscious as a result. They both awake, Tanjiro is reminded of the true goal, and they advance to defeat Muzan. All of the slayers come together to defeat him, but things aren't looking too good. There comes to a point in the fight where low tier slayers form a meat shield in order to protect the Hashira, and the usually expressionless Giyu is visibly horrified by the massacre that the lower tier slayers are throwing themselves into. More and more into the fight, we see a large range of expressions from Giyu as well as internal monologue. He reassures himself of his abilities as well as stating that he's the water pillar, truly confirming that he was able to overcome his previous doubts. As the fight is drawing to a conclusion, Giyu is severely wounded and missing an arm. Despite this, the first thing on his mind is to look for Tanjiro. Upon seeing a seemingly dead Tanjiro, he seems to be burdened mentally again, as he believes that he failed to protect someone for the third time. Upon seeing Tanjiro regenerate an arm, he's quickly able to deduce what's happening and temporarily cast aside his emotions to prioritize killing the Muzan inside of Tanjiro. However, upon seeing Tanjiro seemingly fight off Muzan from within, he hesitates on killing him, hoping that he will end up turning back. With Suyuri injecting the medicine into Tanjiro, he turns back to human and the fight is won. The Demon Slayer Corps are disbanded due to all demons dying out, and Giyu lives out the rest of his days peacefully. And that's the life of Giyu Tomioka, a severely underlooked character. On a surface level, he could be interpreted as a boring character, but looking deeper, I believe that he's extremely underrated and has some fantastic development during the course of the series. Thank you for watching and enjoy the